Eduardo Montenegro was a man marked by the past. A multimillionaire, owner of one of the largest technology companies in the world, he had it all: money, power, and influence. But deep down, he knew there was something, or rather someone, missing. His life changed drastically 24 years ago when his fiancée, Helena, died in a tragic car accident, an event that left him devastated and lonely. Eduardo remembered that night vividly. He was driving to their engagement party when he received a call from the police that Helena had been in an accident. When he arrived at the scene, he found her car completely destroyed. The engagement necklace, an exclusive gift he had custom-made, was missing. Helena did not survive the accident, and Eduardo never completely got over the loss. It was a sunny afternoon when Eduardo decided to visit his summer mansion, located in a luxurious condominium by the sea. The property was under the care of a new team of employees, hired by his personal assistant, Clara. He wanted to check on things and prepare for a party he was having the next weekend. Upon arriving at the mansion, Eduardo was welcomed by Miguel, the butler, who had been in the Montenegro family for more than 2 decades. Miguel had known Eduardo since he was a child and was always a father figure to him after his father's death. "Good afternoon, Mr. Montenegro," greeted Miguel with a slight wave. "How was the trip?" "Calm down, Miguel. I'm looking forward to seeing the changes in the garden. Clara told me that the new gardener is very talented." "Yes, sir. Elisa has done a wonderful job. I'll accompany you there." As he walked down the hallway, Eduardo couldn't help but notice the old photographs hanging on the walls. Images of Helena, smiling on several occasions, brought back painful memories. He shook his head, trying to focus on the present. Arriving at the garden, Eduardo saw a young woman taking care of the flowers. She was on her back, focused on her work. He approached her, feeling a strange chill run down his spine. When the young woman turned around, Eduardo froze. She was identical to Helena. Every detail of her face, her expressive eyes, her shy smile, was as if Helena were alive again. "Good afternoon," said Eduardo, trying to maintain his composure. The young woman stood up, wiping her dirt-stained hands on her apron. "Good afternoon, sir. My name is Elisa." Eduardo felt a shock when he heard her voice, so similar to Helena's. He could hardly believe what he saw. What really left him speechless was the necklace Elisa wore. It was the same necklace he had given Helena as an engagement gift, an exclusive necklace made to order. How was this possible? "That necklace," Eduardo began, his voice trembling. "Where did you get it?" Elisa touched the necklace, surprised by the question. "It was my mother's," she replied. "She gave it to me before she passed away. She said it was a very special gift." Eduardo could hardly believe what he was hearing. His mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. He decided not to press further at that moment. "I understand," he said, still stunned. "You do an excellent job here. Keep it up." He walked away, feeling a mix of emotions. What was happening? Was it possible that Helena had a daughter he didn't know about? And how was that necklace, which should have been destroyed in the accident, now with Elisa? Eduardo spent the rest of the afternoon secluded in his office, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. He revisited Helena's old diaries and letters, looking for any clue that could explain the mystery. Elisa's discovery and the necklace reignited a flame of hope and doubt in his heart, a dangerous mix that could change his life forever. That night, as the mansion fell into profound silence, Eduardo swore an oath to himself. He would discover the truth about Elisa and her connection to Helena, no matter what it took. Eduardo couldn't sleep that night. Elisa's face, so similar to Helena's, and the necklace she wore, disturbed his mind without ceasing. He needed answers and decided the best way to get them was to hire a private investigator. In the morning, he contacted Ricardo, a detective renowned for his discretion and efficiency. "Ricardo, I need you to find out everything about Elisa and her family," Eduardo said on the phone, his voice full of urgency. "Every detail, every connection. I need to know how she is connected to my deceased fiancé." Ricardo, a meticulous and experienced man, took on the case immediately. He knew that when Eduardo Montenegro was looking for him, it was something of extreme importance. He began the investigation focusing on Elisa and her mother, Anna. Meanwhile, Elisa continued her work in the garden, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions she had unleashed on Eduardo. Elle was a simple, dedicated, and kind young woman with a genuine love for nature. Elisa lived with her Aunt Marissa since her mother's death. Marissa was a kind woman who welcomed Elisa like a daughter and raised her with affection and solid values. Ricardo began his investigations through public records. He discovered that Anna had worked as a nurse at a local hospital for many years. She was known for her dedication and compassion towards patients. Anna's death was the result of a tragic car accident, which occurred when Elisa was just 10 years old. Details of the accident were vague, but there was no indication that it was anything other than a fatality. Eduardo was even more intrigued by the initial information. The coincidences were frightening. Both Helena and Anna had died in car accidents, and both had a connection with the same necklace. However, he needed more proof to understand the true connection between them. Ricardo decided to deepen the investigation. He visited the old hospital where Anna worked and spoke to her former colleagues. He discovered that Anna was a reserved woman who rarely talked about her personal life. However, an old friend of Anna, called Clara, revealed interesting information. Anna showed up one day with her daughter and a very beautiful necklace. "She said it was a family gift," said Clara, "but she never talked about the girl's father or her life before moving here." Ricardo felt that he was approaching something significant. He continued the investigation, looking for records that could link Anna to Helena or Eduardo. He discovered that Anna had moved to the city shortly before Elisa's birth, without leaving many traces of her previous life. Meanwhile, Eduardo tried to deal with his conflicting emotions. Elisa's presence in the mansion was a constant reminder of Helena, but he needed to remain calm and rational. More and more, he felt compelled to get to know Elisa better, not just as a possible daughter of Helena, but as the person she was. Ricardo returned with more information after a few days. He found Anna's old diary, kept among her few personal possessions that were given to Marissa after her death. The diary contained sporadic notes about Anna's life, but one entry in particular caught Ricardo's attention. "Today, I finally feel safe, away from everything and everyone that could hurt us. Elisa is my reason for living, and I will do everything to protect her. The necklace I received must remain with her. It's the only thing that keeps us safe." Connects to the past. This entry reinforced Eduardo's suspicions. Anna was clearly running away from something or someone, and the necklace was a crucial piece of that puzzle. But there were still many pieces of the puzzle missing. Eduardo knew the truth was getting closer, but he also feared what he might discover. Eduardo decided to confront Marissa, Elisa's aunt, in search of more answers. He arranged a meeting with her at the mansion, anxious and apprehensive of what he might discover. The Montenegro mansion was silent that afternoon. Sunbeams streamed through the library windows, illuminating the old books and elegant furniture. Eduardo felt the weight of the moment as he waited for Elisa to arrive. He had spent the last few nights awake, reflecting on the possible revelations that were about to happen. Elisa entered the library with hesitant steps, her eyes reflecting curiosity and apprehension. Eduardo observed her for a moment, noticing her striking resemblance to Helena, every detail of her face and delicate posture. This only increased the urgency of his questions. "Elisa, I need to talk to you about something very serious," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. Elisa looked nervous, but nodded. "Of course, sir. What is it about?" Eduardo opened a drawer on his desk and took out an old photo. It was a photo of Helena, smiling and radiant, wearing the necklace that was now around Elisa's neck. He handed the photo to Elisa, watching her reaction carefully. "Do you recognize this person?" asked Eduardo. Elisa looked at the photo and her eyes widened. "She looks a lot like me, but I don't know her. Who is she?" Eduardo took a deep breath, feeling the pain of the past emerge. "This is Helena, my fiancée who passed away 24 years ago. And that necklace was hers. How did he end up with your mother?" Elisa turned pale. Her hands shook slightly as she held the photo. I don't know. My mother never told me where the necklace came from. She just said it was very important and for me to take good care of it." Eduardo felt a wave of frustration and sadness. He knew Elisa didn't have all the answers, but he needed to understand how this was all connected. He decided to take a more direct approach. "Elisa, would you like to take a DNA test? If you agree, we can clear this all up once and for all." Elisa hesitated, her eyes reflecting confusion and fear. But finally he nodded. "If it helps uncover the truth, I will." The tension in the room was palpable as Eduardo made the necessary calls to organize the DNA test. The process would be quick, but the wait for results seemed like an eternity. That night, Eduardo reflected on his life and the choices he had made. He remembered the happy times with Helena, the dreams they shared, and the pain of losing her so tragically. Elisa's presence had reopened old wounds, but it had also brought a spark of hope. Days later, the DNA test results arrived. Eduardo held the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the weight of the truth that was about to be revealed. He and Elisa met again in the library to open the envelope together. The silence was deafening as Eduardo opened the envelope and read the results. His heart was beating fast. Finally, he looked at Elisa, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "Elisa, you are my daughter." Elisa was in shock, tears streaming down her face. The truth was overwhelming. Eduardo felt a mix of relief and pain. He finally had a connection with Helena again, but he also knew that the road ahead would be complex and full of challenges. I don't know what to say," Elisa murmured. "You don't need to say anything now," Eduardo replied, approaching her and placing his hand on her shoulder. "We have time to understand all of this together. The important thing is that you are here, and I promise that I will do everything to protect you and take care of you." At that moment, father and daughter began to follow a new path, united by the truth and the desire to rebuild their lives based on the revelations of the past. The DNA test was carried out, and the results left Eduardo in shock. Elisa was really Helena's daughter. He held the report in his hands, feeling a mixture of emotions that ranged from astonishment to joy to confusion. How was this possible? Helena never mentioned being pregnant, and he was sure she wasn't expecting a child before the accident. Eduardo knew that the only way to understand what really happened was to investigate Helena's past further. He decided to look for old friends and family, hoping to find clues that could explain the situation. The first conversations didn't reveal much. They just confirmed that Helena was a reserved and discreet person. He met Helena's old friend, Camila, who mentioned something that caught her attention. In the months before the accident, Helena was different, said Camila. She distanced herself from everyone, including me. I thought it was because of the wedding preparations, but now I think there could be more involved. Eduardo began to suspect that Helena might have had reasons to hide her pregnancy. Maybe she was dealing with something she didn't want to share with anyone, not even him. He decided to look for medical records and find out if Helena had seen any doctors during that period. Meanwhile, Elisa was dealing with the revelation that Eduardo was her biological father. The discovery profoundly shook her perception of identity and origin. She had many unanswered questions and felt lost amidst so many conflicting emotions. The relationship between her and Eduardo became tense, with both trying to find a way to connect amid the emotional chaos. Elisa began spending more time with Marissa, seeking comfort and guidance. Marissa, in turn, was equally surprised by the revelation, but tried to support Elisa in the best way possible. "My dear, I know this is all a lot to take in," said Marissa, stroking Elisa's hair. "But you're strong, and we'll find a way to get through this together." Eduardo, determined to discover the truth, hired a researcher specializing in genealogy and family history, Pedro, to help him unravel the mystery. Pedro began examining hospital records and old files, looking for any clues about Helena's pregnancy. After a few weeks of investigation, Pedro found a promising lead. There were records of a woman with the same name and physical characteristics as Helena who attended a clinic in a neighboring city during the months before the accident. Eduardo and Pedro went to the clinic to investigate. "Yes, I remember Helena," said the nurse in charge, Ana Paula. "She came here for regular appointments, but she always seemed worried and anxious. She never mentioned being pregnant, but had several routine checkups." Eduardo felt that he was getting closer to the truth. He needed to understand what led Helena to hide her pregnancy and how Elisa ended up being raised by someone else. He decided to visit Helena's former workplace, where she had colleagues and friends who could provide more information. Meanwhile, Elisa tried to find a balance between her current life and the new reality. She began to open up more to Eduardo, sharing her memories and feelings. Eduardo, in turn, tried to be patient and understanding, knowing that their relationship needed time to develop. "Dad, do you think my mother was afraid of something?" asked Elisa one day, while walking through the garden. "Maybe, Elisa. I believe she was trying to protect you from something or someone. But we need to find out what it was," Eduardo replied, with a determined look. With this new determination, Eduardo continued his search for the truth, knowing that each step brought him closer to fully understanding what happened to Helena and why she made the decisions she did. The journey was far from over, but he was determined to face any obstacle to finally clarify the past and build a stronger, more united future with his daughter. Eduardo was determined to unravel the entire mystery surrounding Helena's past. With the help of Ricardo and Helena's old friends, he managed to find Marta, a close friend who had become distant after the accident. They arranged to meet in a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. Marta, a tired-looking woman with a gleam of determination in her eyes, seemed reluctant to speak at first. Eduardo encouraged her, promising that any information would be treated with the utmost discretion. Helena was scared. Marta began, her voice low and full of emotion. She found out she was pregnant, but she also discovered something terrible about someone very close to her. She didn't know who to trust. Eduardo was perplexed, trying to understand Marta's words. Who could this person be that Helena feared so much? And why didn't she ever tell me anything? Asked Eduardo, his voice full of pain and confusion. Marta hesitated, looking into Eduardo's eyes. It was Carlos, your old partner, she revealed. Helena discovered that he was involved in illegal activities and threatened to expose Montenegro family secrets if Helena didn't stay away from you. She was terrified. Eduardo felt a wave of anger and sadness. Carlos has always been an ambitious man, but he never suspected that he could be capable of something so vile. Helena, caught between the fear of losing Eduardo and Carlos' threat, made the difficult decision to step away and protect her daughter's future. While Eduardo digested this revelation, Elisa continued her own journey of discovery. Spending more time with Eduardo, she began to feel more comfortable exploring her mother's memories. On a rainy afternoon, while organizing the attic of Aunt Marissa's house, Elisa found an old wooden box hidden in a dusty corner. Inside the box were old letters from Helena, carefully stored. Elisa took them with shaking hands and began to read. The letters were addressed to Eduardo, never sent, and revealed Helena's deep feelings, her fears, and the truth about Carlos' threat. One of the letters, dated shortly before the accident, said, "Eduardo, my love, if you're reading this, it's because something terrible has happened. I discovered that I'm pregnant, but I also discovered that Carlos is involved in criminal activities. He threatened to expose his family's secrets if I don't stay away. I can't risk it. Our safety, especially now that we are expecting a child. Please understand that I love you more than anything, but I need to protect our baby with all my love, Helena." Elisa was shocked when she read her mother's words. She ran to Eduardo, who was in the office, and showed him the letters. Eduardo read each word with a heavy heart, feeling Helena's pain and sacrifice. "My God," Eduardo murmured, with teary eyes. "Helena suffered so much and I didn't know." The truth was finally coming out, but it also brought more questions. Eduardo and Elisa knew they needed to confront Carlos and discover the full extent of his actions. That night, Eduardo and Elisa talked at length about the past, Helena, and the future they could build together. The pain of the past was still strong, but the union between father and daughter was growing stronger, anchored in the search for truth and justice. Eduardo decided that the next step would be to confront Carlos directly. He knew that this confrontation could bring more revelations and possibly threats, but he was determined to protect his family and honor Helena's sacrifice. Eduardo was in a frenzy of anger and determination following the revelations about Carlos. Determined to do justice and confront the man who had caused so much suffering to Helena and, consequently, to Elisa, he prepared for the meeting. The discovery that Carlos was involved in illegal activities and used his threats to force Helena away had left him with an almost uncontrollable fervor. Carlos, now a successful businessman, maintained a respectful facade. Height and success. His company had expanded, and he was seen as a pillar in the community. Eduardo knew the confrontation wouldn't be easy, but he was determined not to let Carlos get away with it. Eduardo drove to Carlos' company headquarters, an imposing glass and steel building that reflected the success and power that Carlos had accumulated. When he arrived, he was greeted by the secretary, who made a call to inform him of the unexpected visit. Carlos, upon learning that Eduardo was at reception, showed a slight smile of surprise. He got up from his desk and went to the office entrance, where he found Eduardo waiting with a serious and determined expression. "Eduardo, what a surprise," said Carlos, trying to maintain a cordial smile. Eduardo was not fooled by the friendly facade. What he felt was a mixture of fury and an urgent need to confront Carlos about the dark past he had discovered. "Don't act innocent," replied Eduardo, his voice full of disdain. "I know what you did to Helena." Carlos tried to hide his discomfort, laughing nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about. Helena was a part of the past that no longer interests me." Eduardo wasted no time and presented the evidence he had gathered. With the help of Ricardo and researcher Pedro, he had documents and testimonies that demonstrated Carlos' threats to Helena, as well as his involvement in illegal activities that were about to come to light. "Here are Helena's records and letters," said Eduardo, placing a folder on Carlos's desk. "She was scared of you and was willing to do anything to protect herself and our son. You pressured her and manipulated her." Carlos leafed through the documents with an increasingly tense expression. The appearance of confidence was quickly disappearing. He tried to argue, but Eduardo had solid arguments and unquestionable evidence. "That's absurd," Carlos said, his voice now a whisper. "You can't prove that I did something illegal." Eduardo didn't hesitate. With the help of the evidence, he managed to call the police to the scene. When officers arrived, Carlos was clearly nervous. Eduardo followed the operation with an almost palpable feeling of justice. Carlos was arrested in front of a team of reporters who had already been alerted about the situation. News of his arrest and allegations of corruption and threats spread quickly, creating a media storm. Eduardo and Elisa followed the legal process closely. Carlos was formally accused and, with the accumulation of evidence against him, his conviction seemed inevitable. Carlos' arrest brought a sense of relief to Eduardo and Elisa, but it also left a void that could not be filled. During the process, Eduardo and Elisa grew even closer. They found solace in each other and began to rebuild their lives with a new perspective. The pain and suffering of the past was slowly being replaced by a renewed sense of family and hope. While Carlos faced the consequences of his actions, Eduardo and Elisa looked to the future with the determination to honor Helena's memory and build a legacy of truth and justice. They knew that despite the challenges, love and family were the greatest strengths they could have. With Carlos out of the way, Eduardo and Elisa began to rebuild their relationship. Eduardo apologized to Elisa for all the difficulties and promised that she would do everything in her power to make up for lost time. Elisa, in turn, began to learn more about the Montenegro family and the heritage it carried. The mansion became a place of healing and reconciliation, where father and daughter were finally able to meet and grow closer. Eduardo decided to create a foundation in honor of Helena, aimed at helping women in difficult situations. Elisa became actively involved in the foundation, using her experience and skills to help others. Over time, Eduardo and Elisa became not only father and daughter, but also partners in various social initiatives. The Montenegro mansion has become a center of community activity, bringing new life to the place that was once just a symbol of wealth. Eduardo looked to the future with hope and gratitude. Despite all the difficulties, he found a new reason to live. Elisa, in turn, became a strong and determined woman, ready to face any challenge that life brought. Helena's necklace was now a symbol of love and resilience, passed from mother to daughter and from daughter to the world.